We are going to take a few minutes to talk about some mapping rules. We've already talked about all of our transformations. We have translations, reflections, rotations, dilations. We've talked about all of these, but we also need to be comfortable with the mapping rules for each of them. And I noticed on our last interim assessment, we didn't do so well on the mapping rules part of it. So we're going to do a quick review of rules. And then I'm also going to post in the description of this video. This website is awesome because it has flashcards and it lets you play games and go through flashcards, and it'll just really help you remember the mapping rules. But let's talk about them for a second. If you take X and Y, and this is supposed to just have an arrow, it's not supposed to say tab, but if you add or subtract a number to X, or if you add or subtract a number to Y, that's a translation. You're just sliding it along the graph. All right. If you take X and Y and you keep X the exact same, but you change the sign of Y, that's a reflection across the X-axis. If you keep Y the same and you change the sign of X, that's a reflection across the Y-axis. Whichever one stays the same, that's the axis it's going to reflect across. All right, then we have some more. These we don't really have to have memorized. You just have to be able to use them. A rotation, this is called a reflection around the origin, but it's also a 180-degree rotation. So for 180-degree rotation, you're reflecting across the X-axis and the Y-axis, which means you would have to change the sign of both the X and the Y. And then a dilation is where you're going to multiply X and Y by a number to make it a certain amount of times bigger or a certain amount of times smaller. A dilation is the only one up here that's going to change the shape and size of the original figure. Not the shape. It's just going to change the size. It's going to make it bigger or smaller. So a dilation is not a rigid motion. If you multiply by something, you are changing the size of it, so it's not going to be congruent to the original. So I want to show you what to do if you get to a test and you're like, oh my gosh, I've forgotten everything. I didn't memorize these. I don't know what to do. If that ever happens to you and you have a mapping rule and it's asking you what transformation is happening, I suggest that you pick a point and just start plotting. So let's just pick the ordered pair 2, 3. That would be over here, 2, 3. And if I apply the mapping rule to that, I'm going to keep the X the same, and I'm going to change the sign of Y. So I would plot that down here at 2, -3. Now to me, that looks like I'm probably reflecting across the X-axis, but I'm going to try one more just to make sure. So I'm going to start with a point somewhere over here. Let's go to -5, -1. And again, I'm going to apply the rule to it, where I'm going to keep X the same and change the sign of Y. And again, it looks like it's reflecting across that X-axis. So if you get to a test and you're like, oh darn, I forgot all of my mapping rules, try plotting it and seeing what it looks like. So this one would be a reflection across the X-axis. Let's look at one more just in case you get to the test and you're like, oh no, I don't have these memorized, I don't know what to do. Let's just pick some points and let's try it. Let's start off with, let's go with 5, 3. Sure, why not? And you can pick any point in the whole wide world. It really doesn't matter. I'm going to apply the rule to it, and the rule says change the sign of X and keep Y the same. So if I go to -5, 3, it looks like I'm reflecting across the Y-axis, but I want to try one more point just to make sure. So I'm going to try a point down here. I'm going to go to 2, -6. And if you feel more comfortable, you could actually do a shape. Like if you can't really tell what's happening with the dots, let's do a shape this time. Let's do a triangle. So I'm going to reflect, and I just drew an arbitrary triangle. I'm going to reflect, no, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply the rule to it. Let me go ahead and write all these ordered pairs down first. Okay, so I have my 3 ordered pairs. I'm going to apply the rule to each of them. So I'm going to change the sign of x and keep y the same. So this ordered pair would be at -2, -4. Then I would do the rule to this one, change the sign of x, keep the y the same. So it would end up over here. And then I'm going to apply the rule to this one, change the sign of x, keep the y the same. And so once you pick these points and you try it, hopefully you can see that you would be folding your paper along the y-axis, so that is a reflection across the y-axis. So I would like for you to memorize your mapping rules, but if you don't have a great memory or it just all flies out of your brain on the moment of the test, get out some scratch paper, graph a shape, and then try to do the mapping rule to it, and I think you'll be able to figure it out.